Welcome to this week's episode of Conservation Corner.
I'm Land Restoration Specialist Shane Otto.
I'm Lael Pasquale, manager of the Lucier Family Heritage Center.
And I'm Lars Sigden, botanist naturalist.
In 2019, Dane County Parks launched our first annual Natural Areas Conservation Art Contest. Students in grades 6th through 12th grade were able to submit an art piece that they created of a threatened or endangered species here in Wisconsin. The top 3 art pieces were selected to win $500 scholarships. Those art pieces were then turned into magnets, stickers, and window clings that were sold as a fundraiser going on now to benefit our natural areas in Dane County Parks.
Currently, Dane County Parks manages approximately 13,000 acres. 10,000 of those acres are our natural areas, like the one you see behind us right here. This area consists of grassland and reconstructed prairie, where many of these threatened and endangered species from our art contest may inhabit. So the fundraising behind the art contest is to help manage and create more of these wildlands for these imperiled species.
The fundraising materials such as stickers, window clings, and magnets can be purchased online at danecountyparks.com/art contest. We also encourage you to get involved with the art contest through your school, scout group, club, or other community center group by reaching out to the Lucier Family Heritage Center to connect with us to bring your students out to do art in the park and have a nature walk to see some of our natural areas that would be benefited by these fundraising materials.
Here we are in a bur oak woodland. Some very old trees behind me, probably 250 years old, maybe even older than that. This community was characterized by widely spaced bur oaks with an understory of prairie and savanna vegetation that was maintained by frequent wildfire that swept across this landscape 200 years ago. Over the course of time, invasive species were brought here, sometimes on purpose, sometimes on accident, from other continents, and lacking their natural predators and pathogens from their native continents, they expanded across southern Wisconsin and many parts of North America, and now have thoroughly pushed out many of the native species that once inhabited this site. In the past, there were probably a couple hundred species in this woodland. Now there's a very simplified flora, only maybe a dozen species or so, most of them non-native. On the understory we have garlic mustard, very lush this year, producing seed capsules all around me, completely smothering the ground. And in the shrub story we've got common buckthorn dominating this site. The bur oaks above are still alive and healthy, but they're unable to reproduce with these invasive species on site. They need frequent disturbance, which in the past was fire, and sunlight for their young seedlings and saplings to recruit and replace them as they grow old and eventually die. So this site, while it may look pretty to the casual recreationalist walking through this path, is very impaired by the amount of invasive species and the lack of regular fire. It takes management to restore and enhance this site.
So what would we do on a site like this to manage the land, to get back to those native ecosystems that were once here? Well, we have to remove these species that are invading. So we have a lot of buckthorn on this site, so we'd come in here with a group of volunteers or contractors, use chainsaws, cut the buckthorn, and then spray the stumps with herbicide. That's a possible solution to that problem. And then we have all this garlic mustard that can either be treated with herbicide or you can pull the plant. We want to make sure we get all the roots. And the state of this garlic mustard plant is already getting to the phase where if you just laid it on the ground, the seeds would still be viable and would germinate again. So we want to bag this up if we were to do the method of harvest. Like I said, spray it, And that's just the beginning of the management. So in order to get a fire to carry through this woods, we want to add some native vegetation once we've removed the invaders, which would consist of a variety of species of flowers and a variety of species of grass. That vegetation is going to create a fuel, and that fuel is going to help carry the fire that we need to keep the invaders at bay and to stimulate other native species. The sun is imperative in this type of ecosystem. We have to get the sunlight down to the ground where the plants are going to stimulate the oaks or the native species. So in a scenario like this, an acre of land to restore would take several years with a process of cutting the brush, removing the garlic mustard, coming back another year to do the garlic mustard again, until we can start to establish fire, and then fire would be our maintenance tool. So in order to do that, we really need a workforce to help us through this process. That workforce consists of volunteers, contractors, LTEs, and permanent staff. So one of our goals with the Habitat Stamp or art contest that we're having is to help generate funds so we can help with limited term staff, purchasing of supplies like chemicals and native seeds, so we can help restore this habitat.
Here we are in a tall grass prairie. Prairies and oak savannas once covered the majority of southern Wisconsin, and many people are surprised to learn that we have far more trees in this region today than we ever have had in the recent past. Prairies are very important. There's a whole host of birds and invertebrates and wildlife and plants that only can live in areas of full sun, and those areas today are now very rare and limited. So prairies and savannas are ecosystems that we're needing to restore across the county in southern Wisconsin. So prairies require a lot of management in order to maintain those ecological services and that wildlife habitat, and it doesn't come easy. It takes a lot of resources, time, and people in order to make that happen.
So once we establish that we want to restore a prairie, in a typical scenario, Dane County will purchase some land from a farmer that wants to retire, and then we convert that land to prairie. So how does that happen? So typically we want to create a real good seed bed for that prairie restoration so it gets off to a nice start. So we ask that the cooperative farmer will plant soybeans, no-till soybeans, prior to us planting our prairie. The year prior to that, we'll take our volunteers out into some of our existing prairies and collect a high diversity of seeds so we can plant that prairie with. And typically we like to plant anywhere from 30 to 100 species per prairie. That consists of legumes, grasses, and other forbs. So how do we seed it? We take a rotary broadcaster, typically in the months from December to March, and do a frost seeding. So we'll spread that seed with the rotary broadcast spreader and kind of do a real general mix across the field, and then have volunteers come in and spread some real specialty seeds out in that prairie to add to diversity, and then we can come back in following years and collect those seeds from those little spots that we've created. So that's how we get the prairie going. Then we have to start to manage it. So what does that mean? Well, it means we have to come out here with a mower for a couple of seasons, typically 2, before that prairie seed really starts to establish. And the reason for that is when a prairie plant germinates, it really drives down its roots prior to coming up with the plant. So it establishes that root system the first year, and then after the second year, it usually starts to come up, and we see that plant above ground. Early successional plants we'll see wild rye, Virginia wild rye, Indian grass, big blue stem, black-eyed Susan, bergamots will be our pioneer species. And then we'll see things like quinine, blazing star, yellow coneflower start to come in after a few seasons. And then we get to our late successional plants like the silphiums, cup plant, prairie dock, and things like that. So we got the prairie planted. It's growing in nicely. We have a lot of species diversity, but in order to maintain that, we need to put fire in the ground. And about every 4 years is a pretty good rotation to have. And if we don't do it every 4 years, all these seedlings from these tree lines and woodlots that are around the prairie will start to seed in, either through the wind or animals carrying the seeds in there. And once those trees get too large, fire won't take care of them, and then we'll have to come in and do some more intense management. So it's a really quite a process for all this to happen, and our volunteers, contractors, permanent staff, and LTEs are really involved. And you can help us with your purchase of your art contest magnet, sticker, or window cling to help provide some of the seeds and management for our prairies as well.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Conservation Corner on the Dane County Park's Natural Areas Conservation Art Contest.
Donate to the art contest on our website.
And please continue to join us every Friday for the newest edition of Dane County Park's Conservation Corner. Thanks, and have a great weekend.